Gelken plays down fears of an oversupply of flats. The mainland economy posts stronger fourth quarter growth, and the fate of foreign hostages still hangs in the balance in Algeria.
Good evening. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying says his government will remain vigilant and ensure there won't be an oversupply of flats in Hong Kong. Leung also dismissed claims he changed his stance towards waste incinerators. Andrew Lau reports.
In his policy address, Leung Chun-ying stressed the need to increase housing and land supply. In an interview today, the chief executive was asked whether there would be a property slump in Hong Kong should interest rates go up.
The 1997-1998 crash of the market wasn't really due to oversupply. I remember very clearly that the Asian financial crisis hit Thailand on the second day of July 1997, and it hit Hong Kong, and not just Hong Kong, but also other Asian markets. Well, we shall remain vigilant. And therefore, you can see that in the last 6 months, government has been taking measured steps. We are mindful of the economic situation in the States and in Europe, the economy slowing down on the mainland and so on and so forth. And any possibility of interest rate hike might bring market adjustments. So we are being very cautious.
Leung also defended a move by the Department of Justice, requesting the Court of Final Appeal to seek Beijing's clarification in the right of a boat controversy, saying it's in line with the Basic Law. And he dismissed claims that his stance towards the construction of waste incinerators now is different from the one during his election campaign.
What I said then was that we'll try our very best to reduce solid waste at source, so that we don't have to use incineration, which would be a last resort.
It's interesting that you had to check your own, you had to check the recording to see what you had said. Because people did have the impression that you were against the incinerator, and now you're for it.
Well, as you said, it was an impression, and that's why I had to check the facts.
But have you changed your mind?
So you've never been against the incinerator?
No, I said it would be a last resort. It isn't just a question of having or not having incineration. It is also a question of the volume of waste that we put through incineration. So incineration or not, we should reduce the volume of solid waste at source.
Leung also defended proposals to set up various committees and advisory bodies, while stressing the need to listen to different views in its policy implementation. Andrew Lau, TVB News.
Now, as the chief executive tries to battle a housing shortage, there's been strong interest among aspiring homeowners in 2 subsidized housing projects. Today was the deadline to apply for both schemes. With the number of applicants exceeding the number of units on offer many times over, there are now calls for the government to do more to help first-time homebuyers. Doors opened at 8 this morning here at a housing authority office and inflocked anxious potential homeowners. It was the last day to apply for second-hand home ownership scheme flats for those who currently do not live in public housing flats. And with the land premium waived, many people wanted to try their luck. This woman said she's helping her son apply, although they're not certain they will buy the flat even if their application is selected. Meanwhile, many people lined up at the Housing Society's office in Tai Hang, rushing to get their forms in by the 5 p.m. deadline for the subsidized flats at Greenview Villa in Ting Yi. This man said he preferred Greenview Villa over the HOS flats because it's a new estate. But with such little supply now, we can't really be picky, he said. 5,000 second-hand HOS units are on offer, with 500 of them set aside for single-person households. Greenview Villa is offering just under 1,000 flats, with 99 of them earmarked for single-person households. Applicants will be selected through a ballot system and can only choose one of the 2 projects if both bids are successful. Founder of property agency Centerline, Xi Wing-ching, said people are anxious to get a flat through these subsidized projects because prices are still going up. And he said the government's plan to raise land supply isn't the way out of the city's housing problems. He suggested restricting developers to only sell flats to first-time homebuyers in future land auctions.
If they imply this condition to the land sales, the developer will not pay such a high land premium in the land auction. If the land price start to come down, people will have different vision about the future.
There's been strong interest in both Greenview Villa and second-hand HOS schemes. Both have received tens of thousands of applications each.
Owners of old commercial diesel vehicles may be given a subsidy of up to 30% to get their vehicles off the street. Now, that's part of the government's $10 billion plan to get rid of high-polluting vehicles. But as Temeli Tianmei reports, not everyone is happy about it.
Old diesel vehicles like this lorry release cancer-causing chemicals into the air. In his policy address, the chief executive announced that $10 billion would be set aside to remove these high-polluting vehicles. Depending on the vehicle's age, the government will subsidize owners to get them off the road. Secretary for the Environment, Wong Kam Sing, says the current payment scheme is more generous than the previous voluntary campaign that only paid up to 18% of the vehicle cost.
For the older vehicle, the value is lower, and therefore the excrescence payment should also reasonably be lower. And also for the newer vehicles, well, maybe they have already reached 13, 15 years old, and therefore they should be offered a greater incentive.
Paul Law, who's chairman of a motor vehicle company, thinks most commercial diesel vehicle owners will switch to newer ones since maintenance costs for old vehicles are high. But Mr. Yun here thinks the cost of new vehicles is still too much despite the subsidy. Besides air quality, the government also hopes to tackle environmental issues on 3 other fronts, including resource sustainability, eco-friendly buildings, and nature conservation. It hopes to reduce waste at the source and hasn't ruled out charging for food waste, which accounts for 1/3 of all landfilled waste. The Environment Bureau also hopes to increase the current recycling rate of 48%. They hope to hit 55% by 2015. Temeli Tianmei, TVB News.
To other news now. Signs today the mainland economy is finally rebounding from its deepest slump since the 2008 global financial crisis. GDP growth was stronger than expected in the fourth quarter, but overall growth for the entire 2012 failed to reach 8%. James Agilia reports.
Gross domestic product rose 7.9% from October to December, compared with the same quarter the year before. That's higher than a 7.4% growth in the third quarter of 2012. Full-year growth of 7.8% was ahead of the 7.7% forecast, beating Beijing's 7.5% target, which seemed to be in jeopardy just several months ago. However, it's the first time since 1999 that annual growth has slipped below 8%. Forecasters expected a rebound in early 2012, but pushed that back after demand for China's exports was hurt by the sluggish U.S. recovery and Europe's debt problems. International Monetary Fund Managing Director Christine Lagarde expects China to continue its robust economic growth, but she warned policymakers in emerging markets should be on the lookout for damaging spillovers from advanced economies. Adding to the slowdown in China last year were government controls imposed to cool a real estate boom and inflation fueled by Beijing's massive stimulus in response to the 2008 crisis. Also a possible sign of more slowdowns ahead. China has for the first time recorded a drop in its working-age population. Authorities expect it to decrease steadily and gradually over a long period, or at least before 2030. But one analyst says there is another factor that would negate this.
So I think basically, the labor is not so much just about the quantity of labor. It's all about the productivity.
In other words, producing more efficiently. Beijing is also trying to reduce reliance on exports and investment by nurturing self-sustaining growth driven by domestic consumption, and increased urbanization should help that. But analysts say China could suffer a setback if the government fails to maintain investment spending that is propping up a recovery. James Lagilia, TVB News.
The British government says the hostage crisis in the remote desert of Algeria is not over and warned of more bad news to come. Algerian helicopters and special forces stormed the gas production complex near the border with Libya yesterday to wipe out Islamist militants and free hundreds of hostages from at least 10 countries. But what happened next is shrouded in mystery, with wildly conflicting reports of multiple deaths and injuries. By nightfall yesterday, Algeria's government said the raid was over. But Britain's Foreign Office said this morning that the terrorist incident remains ongoing. It's believed that Algerian forces struck as the militants attempted to leave the complex with a number of hostages in several vehicles. At least 6 hostages, perhaps as many as 30, were killed, along with 15 terrorists. Algerian sources admit there were casualties among the hostages, but say up to nearly 600, mostly local Algerian workers at the complex, were freed. Angry Western governments, who were not informed in advance of the raid, are demanding answers.
Unfortunately, the best information we have at this time, as I said, indicates that U.S. citizens are among the hostages, but we don't have, at this point, more details to provide to you.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has postponed an important speech on Europe to monitor events.
It is a very dangerous, a very uncertain, a very fluid situation, and I think we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility of bad news ahead.
The al-Qaeda-linked group that attacked the complex on Wednesday said it was in response to the French intervention in neighbouring Mali. French troops in Mali are now being joined by the first contingents of soldiers from a UN-mandated force being sent to dislodge Islamist rebels who've taken over much of the country's north. A Pakistani-born Canadian citizen was sentenced to 14 years in prison in the United States yesterday for providing material support to overseas terrorists. Taimur Rana was convicted earlier of providing support for the Pakistan-based group Lashkar-e-Taiba. The group has been blamed for the deadly 2008 Mumbai attacks. Jurors did clear Rana of the third and most serious charge of involvement in the 3-day rampage, which has often been called India's 9/11.
And when we come back, American officials in Japan to help with Boeing 787 probe, the highly anticipated Lance Armstrong interview, and striking gold in Australia.
It's another suspenseful round. Perfect angels. Angelic vocals. I love you. Saturday, America's Got Talent at 8:30 on Pearl.
Committed to cooking perfect rice.